Hello, everyone. Let's talk about the power of language and how words can completely change over time. They can change meaning. Language changes with culture, generations, and just the way people communicate in general, right? So, um, for instance, the King James Version Bible. So it's a really good example of how language changes over time. So people today, we don't talk the same way that the KJV is written, right? So words like thee and thou and hast and ye were normal back then. I believe it was the Elizabethan language. Today, people just say, whereas people just say you and your and them and they, kind of get the idea. So the language has changed in that regard, and not only that, but um, I remember there's a ton of words in the King James Bible that have totally different meanings. For awful, for instance, terrible, we just, it had a meaning back then and we use it differently now. But like, for instance, conversation, the word conversation. So I remember reading the Bible and seeing the word conversation, and at first when I read it, because of the context, I thought it meant talking to someone. Because that's the way it just means talking to someone. Conversation between two people, talking to somebody. But later, I learned, amongst other words, I learned that in the KJV Bible, conversation often meant the way that someone lives their life rather than a conversation between two people. And that confused me at first because I was reading the verse with today's meaning instead of the older meaning. So, for example, in the Bible, it says, "Let your conversation be as it becometh of the gospel of Christ." Let your conversation be as it becometh the gospel of Christ. And when you first read it, I think, or when I first read it, I think it was only talking about speech and how we talk. But it actually means your lifestyle and your behavior should reflect Christ, which I thought was amazing. And I think it's a really good example of how language changes over time. But another word that kind of surprised me was the word broadcast. So, broadcast originally meant when you're scattering seeds by hand on a farm, like when you're farming. But today, we all know broadcast as meaning television, radio, and online content, things like that. So, older slang was things like cool and awesome, and newer slang is touch grass, no cap, fire, things like that. So, but another factor when it comes to what about the power of language is tone and context. So, tone matters a lot in a conversation. Um, Even in text messaging, like when I text someone and I say, okay, dot, or K. Some people might find that rude, but some people might just say, okay, it may just click with them. They don't take anything offensive or they don't get offended by it. But yeah, like context also matters. So giving somebody context, and if you normally text like that or you normally talk like that, nobody will think anything more of it. But if you would like to elaborate and then you just use the word okay, um, then someone might think, oh man, maybe something's wrong. So tone and context matter. And the word conversation in the Bible is a good example of that, because today people think of talking, but back then it often just meant behavior or lifestyle. Just another example, the same example. But anyways, so my final thoughts on this would be just just how important it is to understand that with new language and understanding and comprehending what maybe the younger generation are saying is important, because we want to be able to communicate to our younger generation. And if we don't, I don't particularly use their terminology, lit, all those things, but I understand it, right? So it's better that we understand what we're, what they're saying to us. But And just realizing that maybe something that doesn't sound right. Um, I'm trying to think of another example, but Riz, Riz is another big one. It's basically just flirting, is what Riz means, but it's just short for charisma. So, another good example of that. Anyways, it's been really great learning all these things, and I'm looking forward to learning more. So, thank you for your time.